Welcome again, everyone. This is Best Practices Boot Camp Part 2. I'm Glenn Stout. I'm the Vice President of Marketing and Sales for RynohLive. I want to thank you for joining our second in our series of webinars presented by Lender Secure. If you are new to the Boot Camp series and you're interested in viewing Part 1, please visit our website at lendersecure.com. That's lendersecure.com. There you will find the audio, the video, and I believe you've got PowerPoints there for you as well. So that can be found on our resources page. So I also thought I'd begin today with an overview of Lender Secure. Take just a couple minutes to go through this if you don't mind. We officially launched in October of last year with the objective of assisting our industry with ALTA's best practices. We are designed to be a one-stop shop, and we currently have 9 best-in-class solutions providers through a web portal, again, lendersecure.com. And the companies that comprise Lender Secure deliver solutions that satisfy what we believe to be the most critical components of best practices, and that is securing your data, your documents, and your dollars. We currently work with title insurance underwriters, independent title and settlement agents, attorneys, attorney agents, escrow agents, and notaries. Lender Secure currently consists of the following partner companies. I'm going to go through those very briefly, but I thought I'd give you a little heads up as to what these companies do. So starting with Real Estate Data Shield, recently designated as an elite provider from ALTA, they offer a compliance management platform that delivers mandated security compliance solutions, information security policy templates, online staff training, security self-assessment tools, as well as on-site assessments. Next is RynohLive. We are also an elite provider, and we offer a patented solution that ensures compliance with best practice pillar number 2 specifically, and we conduct an automated and daily 3-way reconciliation of escrow accounts. We have a positive pay component and much more. Iron Mountain, who will be presenting today, is a leading provider of document destruction, secure shredding, and records management. First Advantage, another one of our partners, offers a comprehensive employment background check and screening services, including criminal record searches, education, employment, and professional license verifications, global sanctions, and credit checks. Also presenting today is Security Compliance Associates, and they are a premier information security services provider that delivers world-class information security assessment, audit, and compliance services. DataMotion, email encryption solution that enables you to securely send and receive sensitive personal information from your desktop. Marble Security, and we're almost there, is a security management platform that prevents sophisticated attacks on enterprise networks via secure virtual private networks. Another presenter today is Secure Cloud Systems, and they deliver a dependable hybrid data security product by use of its micro-encryption and micro-tokenization process. Their methods protect against a mass data breach as well as many other forms of cyber threats. And last but not least, we have Stateside Underwriting Agency, and they're the leading provider of cyber liability and computer fraud insurance to the settlement industry. Okay, so phase 1 was to assemble these 9 partners together. Phase 2, which we will roll out very shortly, we're going to be offering discount packages for those who come to the portal, and please stay tuned for what those packages will be. But there will be discount packages for those who are interested in more than one of the solutions that we've mentioned prior to. I want to remind everyone that as an attendee of the webinar, you're going to be receiving 2 white papers. The first one is called What Forms Require Protection, and that's being presented by Secure Cloud Systems. We're also offering 6 Steps to Total Escrow Security, which is presented by RynohLive. These will be emailed out to you very shortly after the webinar today. And finally, I want to invite everyone to visit the Lender Secure website and let you know that today's presentation will be there on the site sometime next week. I also want to ask you to take a few minutes to respond to our survey that, again, will be emailed to you shortly after the presentation today. Our program will run approximately 60 minutes, and we're going to follow that with a Q&A session. So if you will notice on your screen there, I believe it should be on the lower left-hand side of your screen, there's a chat box. Feel free to send some questions our way, and we'll answer that at the end of the presentation. So I'm going to turn the program over to our moderator for today, is Chris Galata. Chris is the CEO and founder of Real Estate Data Shield. He has represented institutional lenders in mortgage finance transactions for more than 20 years. He operates a successful law firm out of New York City and launched Real Estate Data Shield 3 years ago. He regularly speaks nationally on information and data security and is a preferred vendor to leading national lenders and national underwriters. And Chris, I'll give the show to you.
Thanks so much, Glenn, and welcome everybody to Best Practice Bootcamp number 2. First thing I wanted to do was just reiterate what Glenn said and share with everyone how proud both Rhino and Real Estate Data Shield are to be designated by ALTA as their first and, as I understand it, only best practice elite providers to date. And I also wanted to just recap from Best Practice Bootcamp 1 very quickly some of the most important insights that our speakers shared. So Dick Reese of RynohLive spoke in the Best Practice Bootcamp 1 about pillar number 2, compliance, and a few highlights of his discussion included escrow reconciliation must be daily and 3 ways. Positive pay is not optional, and disperse only collected funds. Good funds are not always good. Bud Walder of DataMotion, who spoke about encrypted email, best practice pillar 3 compliance, had another few points that he shared that were important and I wanted to reiterate. Regular email in transit is not secure. It can be intercepted and read easily by a hacker. When you send emails containing non-public personal information, you need to encrypt it to keep the text of the email as well as its attachments secure and FTC best practice pillar 3 compliant. The good news is that encryption is easy to use, easy to implement, and cost-effective as a subscription service. The third speaker from Best Practice Bootcamp number 1 was myself, Chris Galata, Real Estate Data Shield. And what I spoke about was information security laws. And a few things I'd just like to highlight is, 1, Graham-Leach-Bliley and FTC regulations requiring the safeguarding of customer non-public information have been in effect since 2001. So our industry is roughly 13 years out of compliance. Number 2, written information security policies and procedures and staff training are required to meet the regulatory mandate and to safeguard non-public personal information. And point number 3 that I made was that lenders have identified best practice pillar 3, information security, as the top concern. And as our industry handles extraordinarily high amounts of highly, quote, toxic documents containing the most sensitive non-public personal information, the time is now to embrace compliance. The cost of a breach can be business threatening. So as we move forward and we see that we're now in, as ALTA has described it, the year of implementation, our industry needs to really raise the bar, get compliant, and start evidencing it. One of the points I've tried to make is that compliance, in my view, is now the new marketing. So what I would recommend to everyone out there is you work on the toughest pillars first, knock out the other pillars on your own, and then once you have that evidenced and documented, don't sit back and wait. Get that out to your lenders and let them see what you've done in order to protect them and show them that you're mindful of the regulations they come under that make them responsible for us as an industry, and that you've gone to these lengths to prove that your company is compliant and not a risk vector for them. So we're going to move into today's discussion now. And our first speaker is Jim Bram from Security Compliance Associates, and he's going to speak about security assessments. Jim's company has done more on-site security assessments, I believe, than any other company in our space, and understands his security engineers who go out and do the assessments understand the unique workflows, data flows, and risk vectors that title and settlement companies frequently encounter. And what makes them very unique with that knowledge is that they know where to look, what to recommend, and how to make your company secure. And it's not just a general or generic security assessment. Jim's company is a premier information security provider delivering world-class information security assessment, audit, and compliance services. Security Compliance Associates brings leading-edge technology, industry best practices, and depth of experience to each client's specific need. Jim Bram is the CEO of Security Compliance Associates. Jim runs the day-to-day operations of the business and ensures that product and service deliverables are competitive and better than advertised. Jim, would you lead us into your presentation, please?
Yes, I sure will. Thank you, Chris, and thanks to all the participants in today's webinar. I'm going to spend a few minutes this afternoon kind of discussing what a typical assessment process would be to comply with ALTA Best Practice Pillar number 3. You know, as you all probably know at this point, it's one of the most challenging pillars, and in most cases it's recommended that a third party come in and provide this service. So if we can get a slide there. I'm just going to walk through the typical assessment process. And, Glenn, if you could move it to the next slide. There we go. You know, we've in a typical assessment process is going to be broken into a number of segments, and this is pretty much the approach that any assessor would take in these 6 phases of initial call. So if you switch the slide, I'll kind of walk through what the initial call process is, and it's really just to introduce the companies and give you a good idea what to expect during the assessment process and what we'll be looking for, who we will be interviewing in the interview process. Typically we're going to be looking at the IT folks as well as the administrators and HR, depending on the size and complexity of the organization. And then, you know, be able to answer any questions that you may have prior to us coming on site. So, you know, that initial call typically takes about 15 minutes, give or take, and so we follow that up, or it's followed up with some emails to identify specific information we're going to be looking at. So we'll also be discussing kind of what you should be doing in a pre-assessment due diligence. Before we get there, we would want to have you either review and update your information security policies and procedures and make sure that they're up to date if in fact you have them in place. We would have you review your network topology and ensuring that the security devices are configured correctly. Check your web content filtering, ensure that firewalls and if you do have what we call IDS, intrusion defense systems or prevention systems, that they're configured properly, and clean up your administrative account names. Those are some things that we recommend prior to coming on if it's possible, and depending again on the size and complexity. These are some of the elements that we'll be looking at. As really part of the assessment is a comprehensive view of your organization's security posture, and both from a technical, administrative, and physical perspective. So what we'll do from an external perspective is we're actually going to attempt to break into your web-facing, outside-facing IP addresses and websites. And what we'll attempt to do is basically provide proof of how you cannot be exploited. We'll test IP addresses and identify vulnerabilities that exist within those, and look for common weaknesses that someone from the outside could actually get through and penetrate into your environment. We'll test, again, if you do have an IDS, an intrusion defense system, or prevention systems, we'll be testing those. Typically we want to see if the thresholds are accurate, because we're going to come in and tap through lightly on the network and then increase our threshold as we kind of ramp up the attack, if you will, and want to test to see how the IDS performs in that, and make sure that if they do see us coming in, that there's an alert mechanism in place to contact the appropriate folks in your organization and let them know that somebody's tampering coming in from the outside. We also will, at this point, look to do a social engineering exercise, and we're doing 2 things there. We're testing the employee awareness of what to look for in a typical social engineering scheme. These could be spear phishing or phishing. These are email attacks looking to gain basically passwords and credentials of individuals, and this is one of the most common attacks that's going on right now, and one of the most successful attacks that are going on. We've all heard of the large breaches and even some of the smaller breaches, and a vast majority of these are caused by social engineering and then being able to infiltrate into the networks and populate them with malware and viruses and such. So we'll be attempting that through phishing emails, and then we'll look at some pretense calling where we'll try and obtain sensitive information via the telephone, pretending that we're somebody we're not. Okay, so then after the external assessment, we're going to actually come on site. I say we, this is going to be any typical assessment company. So they'll start with the physical assessment of the site, walking around the facility, looking at the various entry points and defenses, if there's cameras, if there's proper lighting, can people see through the windows, can they see screens that are visible through the windows, these types of things. And then we'll come in and do a physical walkthrough of the environment, find out where all of that data is in paper all over the organization, and passwords that are underneath people's keyboards and this type of stuff. From there, we'll do an actual internal vulnerability scan. We'll test every device on the network and look for common vulnerabilities that appear both on servers and on workstations. We'll conduct interviews with management and IT staff. You'll look at workstation reviews. Can people disable their antivirus? Do they have antivirus? Do they have proper content filtering? Can they go out to websites at will, download malicious information and potentially damage your network? We'll look at policies and procedures that are in place. These are common administrative components to a good security environment. And also look at, again, the servers and make sure that servers and all of the devices on the network are configured properly. Go to the next slide. So from that exercise, a report will be provided which will identify detailed findings of all components of the assessment. And this we'll follow up with a couple samples of reports here, but identify basically your whole risk of what your security posture looks like from top to bottom, starting again at an administrative level to a physical level to a technical level. And you'll identify these items and then hopefully get recommendations for how to remediate them, and in a priority that makes the most sense. And what I have to emphasize, what is realistic for your size of an organization. There's various sizes and complexities of your companies, and the law requires that you protect it based on the size and complexity and the reasonableness of your environment. So we will conduct a report, prepare a report for you. I'm going to quickly go through these next 3 slides just to identify the various areas, and I don't think they show up very well. But typically, again, these are a number of components specific around the entire posture, from administrative. Do you have policies? Do you have procedures? Are roles and responsibilities defined? Do you do background checks? Have you done a risk assessment? Do you look at critical applications? Do you do security guidance and training, social engineering? Again, all of the network security components. Do you have a change management process in place? Viruses, malware mitigation, encryption, publicly accessible services, third-party managements, incident response plans, business continuity. Do you have all these components that really make up a comprehensive information security and allow you to comply with Pillar 3? And the reports will show specific components. Keep going if you would, please. So we link this back, or a report should link back to the ALTA best practice pillar number 3. So each of the 156 items that were originally as part of ALTA's best practices should be identified, and whether you comply or you don't comply. And if you don't comply, what comments are there, and how specifically can we remediate them? Next slide, please. And again, looking at what is being tested, what are the results, and what are the recommendations, the specific recommendations to remediate these things. So that's ultimately what a post-assessment report should look like. It should be thorough. It should be very comprehensive. The folks that should be doing these assessments should be experts and trained in information security with specific designations of security expertise, such as a CISSP, a CISM, certified ethical hackers, certified fraud examiner. These are the types of credentials that you want the organization to come in and provide this assessment services for. And lastly, once this assessment is done, there is going to be some findings, and there's going to be some open items to complete, and we typically call this a gap analysis, where we're identifying gaps that have to be addressed and remediated in order for you to be compliant with Pillar 3. And so you look at, again, based on size and complexity, what the shortfalls are, what the vulnerabilities are, what are the highest risk vectors that you need to deal with. Typically going to want to bring your IT folks in and help with the remediation process and address any non-technical shortfalls. Again, a lot of things that we're seeing is folks are either partially through this process, not at all through the process, and there's a lot of components that need to be put together. And then you want to document the remediation steps that are being performed. I think the lenders are going to be looking to see that you're taking proactive steps. I think the key here is not to try and be perfect, but it's to do something. And an assessor should be able to follow not only ALTA's best practices, but really the underlying law, which is Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, which is what the lenders are required to adhere to. So they should be symbiotic as far as the assessment process should link directly back to the law as well as ALTA's best practices. There also should be a component to the assessment, which is ongoing support. As people identify weaknesses and gaps within their security posture, they need a place to come back to and ask questions and help through the remediation process. And you should have that available to you. So I'm going to talk a couple of minutes about some of the findings, the typical findings of what we're seeing out there. As Chris mentioned, we've done a number of these, just under 50 so far in the last year. So a couple items that we're seeing: information security policies and procedures are incomplete, or they're outdated, or they're fragmented. There is no backup plan. There's no disaster recovery policy, a documented policy in place. Shortfalls with antivirus, meaning employees can disable it, or that there's no antivirus on the server. There's lacking or limited firewalls, or there's no monitoring of the firewalls. There's no event logs, or there's no intrusion detection services or systems in place. You keep going, one more slide. A classic one is just allowing anyone in the organization to access all files on all servers, so not using permissions appropriately and exposing data to all the employees in the organization when they don't have the need to know that. Also, we see a lot of folks coming in through wireless access points, being able to access the entire network. That should be restricted to a need-to-know kind of basis. Employees providing usernames and passwords to other folks, so you really have no audit trail. When something does happen, you find out that everybody's using the same password and you have no idea who did what. Another classic is just the security patches. Systems are made up and vulnerabilities are found on a daily basis, and patches are presented to your IT organizations on a regular basis, and those patches should be applied and updated to the systems on a regular basis. And we see where that doesn't happen, or it happens very irregularly. And lastly, we see that there is no due diligence on any third parties you're doing business with, so that when you look through how you're selecting a vendor, there's no formal process to identify the components that you should be looking for. So that's kind of it. That's a full comprehensive what an assessment looks like. It should, again, depending on the size and complexity of your organization, it should be a non-disruptive. It actually should be a valuable exercise. Should be, believe it or not, a pleasant exercise. And there are some side benefits of it. I think specifically, you're going to identify some things that your IT provider or your IT employee, may or may not be doing, the effectiveness of their job. So it sort of validates that they're doing the job that you're paying them to do. That's a good side benefit. And of course, complying with best practices and complying with the laws is another very valuable side benefit. So with that, I'm going to wrap up my piece of the presentation. Again, thank you for your attention. And Chris, I'm going to hand it back to you.
Thanks, Jim. That was really helpful. And again, one of the great things about your company is that they are so familiar with our industry, having spoken at so many events and published so many articles on title and settlement agents and what the assessment process is like. It really brings unique value add when your company comes in and does an assessment. A few quick questions, Jim. How often do you recommend follow-up assessments? So if a company goes through your process, you find a few remediation points from the ALTA 156-point checklist that your reports are specifically key to. If you find that, say there's 10 open items, and then the agent and his staff works with you, and you ultimately end up issuing a certification as to best practice Pillar 3, after that, how often would you recommend that they have you guys back in to do an update?
Yeah, that's a good question, Chris. And I've kind of failed to mention the whole certification process after the remediation components are done. We have issued about 5 to date, where the companies have remediated all of the outstanding items. If we were able to issue a certification, I guess the answer to that would be typically on an annual basis, or right around once a year, unless there's a major change to the environment.
Okay, great. That's really helpful. I'm sure we'll have more questions for you during the question and answer session. Our next speaker is Steve Russo of CertainSafe, and Steve's going to be talking about protecting non-public personal information, and specifically some technology solutions that you should be aware of to help you do that. CertainSafe delivers a dependable hybrid data security product by use of its micro-encryption and micro-tokenization processes. The methods are the strongest and most trustworthy solution to protect against a mass data breach, as well as many other forms of cyber threats. Steve is the Executive Vice President of CertainSafe and is a leading industry expert in secure file sharing. Steve has a keen ability to analyze a business model, build the right team to execute, make tough decisions, and has a proven ability to deliver impressive results. I've met Steve and worked with Steve over the last few months, and one of the things I like most about Steve's company and their products and Steve's approach to data security is it uniquely assumes that at some point there will be a breach. And what Steve's going to discuss today, among other things, is if you assume there's going to be a breach, how do you protect your network so what's taken or migrated out isn't non-public personal information? And so Steve's going to discuss that and some other security points for us. Steve, welcome, and lead us in.
Thank you, Chris. Good afternoon to all. Thank you for joining this Best Practices Bootcamp number 2. In this brief session, the information that we're going to go over, you could see there's an outline up on your screen at the moment. And we'll just go ahead and jump right in and try and cover some of the more sensitive cyber concerns that you may want to take a look at. We're going to begin with protecting your most sensitive data. You always need to choose your cyber providers wisely. You need to find providers that provide solutions that fit your needs for both data, communications, storing data that's at rest, storing data that's in transit. And of course, this is going to change by the size of your organization. Size actually does matter. If you're going to store your information in a data center outside your facility, you should try to ensure that your data center maintains a SOC 1, 2, and 3 certification. SOC 1 previously was considered to be SAS 70. Today they call it SSAE 16. What it really means is the SOC standards are controls that are relevant to audit and primarily financial statements. SOC 2 and 3 address controls relevant to operations and compliance. So it's just ensuring that you have a high quality, well-protected data center. In addition to that, choosing your providers wisely, I would suggest that you look for one that carries HIPAA certified standards, especially with your document storage, so that when you're working on storing your sensitive data and some of this sensitive personal information, you can also use that same product for storing your HR documents and remain compliant on that end. You want to engage experienced experts that are, of course, helpful and knowledgeable to you. You're not expected to be cyber experts. That's our job. So you want to get someone that will work closely and guide you to make good decisions. You want to look for an organization that is not filled with subcontractors. Most all companies should have their work performed by their employees on the cyber side. So in other words, if you're looking out for a cyber provider and you go search their site and you see that they do assessments and web hosting and email, and heck, they'll even make you a website, they're probably subcontracting quite a bit of that work. So take a look at how many employees they have providing the variety of services that they offer, just to ensure that your cyber provider is actually truly the cyber provider, not hiring someone else on your behalf. Understand the need, the methods in which they help protect your communications, protect mobile devices in addition to stationary desktops. Many of us today, a vast majority, are using an Exchange service or an Exchange server, Outlook 365. Well, when you're at your office and you're protecting your email communications, you're behind typically firewalls that are doing somewhat of a job to protect from the average hacker. But once you walk out that space, if you have your phone, your tablet, your laptop, and you're using it outside the confined space of your office where you may have a firewall, your information is exposed. We'll now move on to passwords. How important is a password? You may have heard conversations about passwords. Passwords tend to be very frustrating to some folks. For example, when you log into your bank or you log into some secure service and the service says to you, your password is no good. Please add a capital letter. Please add one number. Please add a special character. Well, there's a reason for this, and you need to pay attention to it. Your passwords should always be a minimum of 8 placeholders. Those 8 placeholders should be a combination of a minimum of 1 capital letter, 1 number, and 1 special character. A special character could be the @ sign, a pound sign, a dollar sign, a percent sign, any of those special characters within your keyboard. When you use this process of using a minimum of 8 placeholders with a combination of a capital letter, number, and special character, you make the hacker's job exponentially more difficult, because the combinations of potential passwords as they're guessing your password to try and access your system grow significantly. And that's what really helps to deter easy password acquisition. Again, you never want to use just a common and easy to remember phrase. You would be amazed how many people in the world use the word password for their password. Don't do it. Make sure that you're being smart about your password. Change your password at least every 90 days. Systems are being executed that are very sophisticated, and we have computers today that are much more powerful than in the past. Change the password so in case someone was attempting to attack your system, you make it just that much more difficult for them. And carry the above guidelines on for all that you can oppose them upon. Your employees, possibly those that you're sharing sensitive information with, anyone that you're involved with in communicating back and forth sensitive documents in and around your business, you want to also make sure that they too are protecting their passwords and being sensitive to the importance of passwords. Because the reality is, if you are working with another entity and somehow that information gets compromised, there is the potential possibility that you get dragged in, your firm gets dragged in, and that's just not a good place. So always pass that information along and try to get people to follow. Let's talk for a minute about what documents require protection. Common mortgage settlement documents include borrower tax returns, payoff letters, lender engagement letters, settlement statement or disclosure forms. That, of course, includes HUDs. Identification information and documents, IRS forms of various types, and uniform residential loan applications. Those are the most common. Whoops, sorry about that. Additionally, common title documents include identification pieces such as driver's license, passports, title order forms, payoff letters, title bills, recordable documents, affidavits, escrow agreements with tax searches, and real estate transfer tax forms. Now there is a document that has been written that's a white paper that will lay this out for you very clear and concise. It can be downloaded from the lenderssecure.com website. I would urge you to do so. Some of the larger lenders that have seen this particular white paper have actually requested that their employees post this white paper up in their cubicles or by their desk as a reminder regarding which documents need to always remain secure and protected. So we've made that available for you. The next thing we're going to discuss is protecting communications. We'll start with email and file sharing. What are the best types of product to consider? How do these types of systems work? Where to go to find a solution? The best types of products and solutions to consider for email and file sharing, from my perspective, are services that can provide both the ability for you to store documents, the ability for you to share documents, the ability to send and receive documents, and above all, but not last but not least, the ability to audit what transpires. There are many email services out there that protect information through encryption, as Chris earlier alluded to. I would urge anyone that engages in email encryption to find a service or a platform that can protect not only data in transit, but data at rest. Data at rest, when you analyze the amount of data that we hold in the title industry, is 10 times, maybe 20 times the amount of that data of which is in transit. So our job, of course, is to protect it all. So I want to be sensitive to that, to suggest that you try to find a vendor who can provide those services for you. Additionally, on the file sharing and file storage, if you're using an encrypted email service, you still require an additional service to store files with and possibly to collaborate back and forth. If you can find a platform that provides all of those services in one, it's a much more economical solution. The way some of these systems work, especially when you are looking to provide security for data in transit as well as at rest, it's a platform type service. It is a service that you log into. Although there are some technologies out today and some additional ones that will be coming out in the very near future that will allow integration into your Outlook if that is an email service that you currently use. Where to go to find the solution? Well, you can certainly come to Secure Cloud Systems. We have these types of solutions for you. There are other providers in and around the industry of which you can find as well, but I urge you to look for a solution that can provide you the full realm of what you need at an affordable price. Implementation of these services depends on scope. You need to first create a security policy. Whether you're a large company or a small company, you should have an exit interview checklist. This exit interview checklist will help to ensure that you disconnect email to those that should not have access if they leave the company. You need to ensure that they no longer have access to your stored files or any other sensitive. And make sure that you have their laptops back. Make sure they have their mobile devices if they belong to the company. Just ensuring by this checklist that you've closed all the holes, you've checked all the T's, and you've dotted all the I's, lock down your security. Email and file storage security should really come first. It would be very beneficial if you had an integrated solution, but again, size matters. The larger the company, the more the integration. The smaller the company, there are other things and other products that you can use to bring yourself to compliance in a reasonable price structure. Cost for services, again, as we said, depends on scope and the size of your company. But I'll give you an example. The CertainSafe product, just as an example, is sold by the seat, and it's $8.77 per month, depending on the amount of data required that an agent needs to store or a user needs to store. And if you had an office of 5 people, you're now talking charges of less than $50 a month to store data, securely share data, and send secure messages back and forth. And as I say, there are certainly many providers out there. This is just one example. Again, integrated software solutions are also typically done by the seat. Depends on how many employees are accessing data, how much data is moving back and forth, how much data is stored, and the actual wear and tear that goes on the service provider's servers. So that is a solution from the integration standpoint that can run anywhere from $500 a month, and I've seen up to $10,000 a month for very significantly sized companies. So your company is going to fall somewhere in between. As I say, with regard to that, size matters. And with that, please feel free to email me if you have any cyber questions that I can answer for you in and around your firm. You can see my email here is listed below. We are an educational company. We spend a lot of time working toward educating the industry. We work closely with the MBA to help formulate guidelines for the banking industry. We work closely with ALTA. If you stay tuned, you see plenty of white papers that have been produced by Secure Cloud Systems. There was one from October Research that just went out today via the title report talking to CEOs and what they need to do to protect themselves. And with that, my name is Steve Russo, and I thank you very much, and I will turn it back over to you, Chris.
Thank you, Steve. That was great. Our next speaker is Stephen Wesley from Iron Mountain, who's going to speak about document storage and security. And Iron Mountain is an information management services company. It's a leading provider of storage and information management services. Their resources for records management, data management, document management, data center management, and secure shredding help to lower storage costs, comply with regulations, and recover from disasters. Steve is the Senior Channel Development Executive, and he supports information management partnerships like ours across North America for Iron Mountain Incorporated. He's been in this role for 4 years and previously served as a secure shredding subject matter expert for Iron Mountain. Steve, welcome to the panel, and take over.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for taking the time out today. It's very much appreciated. So I don't think anyone's surprised by the statement that NPPI, or non-public personal information, continues to grow at an exponential rate, and it grows in multiple formats, both in an electronic and physical formats. And the new and the existing laws and regulations that are out there just continue to heap on rules about how you and your partners have to protect and manage confidential information, especially non-public personal information. Reality of life is the penalties for error are pretty severe these days. So there's really in the big picture, there are three primary challenges that every organization has. The first one, of course, is the escalating regulatory environment. A lot of litigation, new regulations on a yearly basis, and it's very difficult to keep up. As the volume of information continues to grow and continues to grow in different formats, it becomes increasingly more complex. And as it becomes more complex and it's distributed across a broader matrix, it's much more difficult to manage and secure and control. And of course, lastly is, as regulations are added, as we continue to make this information category much more complex, the cost of compliance and of program development continues to go up. So, the trend is, and the trend will continue to be, more and more compliance, higher cost. So, as you're faced with these confounding regulations and as you continue to create more and more information, you need to start to look at ways, partners who can help you manage the flow. So there's really when we think about managing and securing information, there's really two buckets that we want to think about. And the first bucket is the physical security of NPPI. The FTC requires, and most regulations, most litigation requires you to have a program designed and implemented in writing that includes security protections for confidential information, especially NPPI. So you have to have a plan. If your plan includes a partner performing the service, you have to have vetted that partner to ensure that the process is secure, is documentable, and is auditable. So the same is really true of the disposal of this information. Financial institutions especially are required to properly dispose of all confidential information, especially NPPI, but to ensure that it's protected from unauthorized access. You can outsource the task, but not the responsibility. This is a quote taken directly from the OCC bulletin from 2013. And this bulletin was very critical to reinforce to vendors who are an extension of any financial institution. The accountability falls to the bank. And regulators are reviewing these policies and procedures for mitigating risk on an ongoing basis. I'm sure many of you have probably noticed you're getting those kind of questions. Perhaps you're being audited, but at least you're being asked about your compliance. So, the big impact is that the banks are going to continue to look deeper into all of their relationships, and they're going to continue to ask questions. They got to make sure that their vendors are complying with the regulations, and they can feel good about continuing to provide you with that customer data. So what's important to think about when we talk about destroying confidential information? Well, in our mind, we think, I think the first thing you should consider, any business size, from one person to 100,000 persons, should consider implementing a shred-all policy. A shred-all policy ensures that all information gets destroyed, paper information gets destroyed, and in a secure fashion. It ensures nothing gets out. If you choose to use an outside shred service, you should make sure that shred service is properly destroying the NPPI material, and they can meet the compliance and privacy requirements. Excuse me. You have to vet them out, and you have to be sure. If you choose to use office shredders, you want to make sure that you've identified a resource to handle your non-paper information, your electronic data, to ensure that it gets secured properly and disposed of properly. And that includes all of your IT assets, from flash drives through hard drives and servers. Any company that you do outsource your document destruction to, should provide you with a certificate of destruction for your records. And they should be able to help you to understand when it's appropriate for you to destroy certain records, and even if you choose to know what documents can be put into a recycling bin or into a trash container. So when we talk about a storage partner or storing your information, the reality of life is you just can't save everything. As the data continues to mount, you can't save everything. It's important to clearly identify what records are vital and can be stored and need to be stored or protected, and what records you need to keep on hand for a business use, because you need ready access to them. It's also important that you define access levels. You should set policies for individuals within your organizations to have access to pieces of data. Everyone in your organization should not have access to all of your data. It's important to develop retention policies for all your records, and that includes digital records, not just physical records. And of course, as we talked about previously, disposal of these records is very critical, and it's very critical to be done on a regular basis, on a scheduled basis. You really want to consider only storing what you need, and when a document has met its life cycle, its appropriate life cycle, destroy it. And last but not least, this is very important, you should consider disaster recovery when you're working through your records. You need to identify what documentation, what records do you need access to very quickly, so that you can recover your business. Those are your critical business records, and of course, they require the highest level of security. So how do we choose the right partner? What should we think about when we're talking about, what's the right partner? What does that look like? So a couple of things to consider when you're considering outsourcing the disposal or the storage of confidential data. And first and foremost, you want to find a partner that offers a breadth of services that can support you, not just today, but can grow and support you tomorrow. So we're talking about paper storage, paper record storage, digital record storage, secure destruction of paper, plastics, e-waste or IT asset destruction, imaging, image on demand, cloud-based services. You have to look for a vendor that can provide you a complete solution across all of the information that you're handling and you're managing. The next important concept would be, ensuring any vendor you pick is certified. Look for the industry certifications. Ask questions. Are they certified? Are they audited? It's very important to ensure a level of consistency with your confidential information. The third point is security. This is a critical component as well. When choosing a vendor, you want to ensure that the vendor maintains a secure environment. Visit their site. See where they store your material or where they destroy your material. Understand where their trucks come and go. Are their facilities secure? Do they have policies and procedures in place to ensure access is restricted to only those who have a need to access data? Are their employees vetted? Are their vehicles secure? Do they perform audits on themselves? Do they allow out or perhaps have outside audits? Will they allow you to perform an audit? Any vendor you choose should be able to help you with a need assessment. They should be able to provide thought leadership and guidance to you based on the specific type of information, policies and procedures that will help you to manage your volumes. They need to show a demonstrated chain of custody, regardless of the data type. Chain of custody means from your site to their site. Any vendor you have should have good reporting, and again, good audit records. Should be able to advise you on how best to audit your records. Again, thought leadership. Thought leadership is very important, and I tie thought leadership and technology together because I think that they're key to this industry. As technology continues to evolve, the data is going to evolve with it, and the skills needed to protect it has to evolve with it as well. And you have to have thought leadership, and you have to stay ahead of that to ensure that the data is always being protected. It's very important. The last component of this, of course, would be cost. And when you're assessing cost, obviously volumes and locations play a big part in cost. But when you assess cost, you should assess the cost based on the total of the annual program, not on a per unit. A good partner is going to be able to show you how to manage your information in a cost-effective way, to show you what needs to be stored, what can be destroyed, and help you manage the overall total annual program cost. So what's our goal here? The goal for every business should be to build a defensible program, and a defensible program would be defined as following the information management approach, incorporating all the critical program elements to secure and manage, have a comprehensive success methodology for your program, it should involve all of the key stakeholders in the business. It shouldn't be a lone venture. One person in the office owns the records program. That's not the way it should be managed. It needs to be an organization-wide program. And of course, and this is very important, your program needs to ensure that it can protect your corporate reputation. A breach can end your business. It can close your business down. So ultimately, the 4 pillars of any good information program are: it's got to be consistent, it's got to have accountability, both at the senior level and at the user level. It's got to be easily adopted, so it can be adopted at all levels, and all levels need to have access to it. But that doesn't mean that all users need access to all the data. So I want to thank you for your time today. We exist to help, and if there's anything that Iron Mountain can do to assist you with your program needs, we would welcome the opportunity. Thank you. Chris?
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate that. That was very helpful, informative. You know, 2 big things here is that the FTC has a disposal rule, you know, as you've alluded to, so that one thing our members and our participants here on the webinar should know is that as title and settlement agents, we do come under the FTC disposal rule. And again, that doesn't apply just to paper. It includes digital media. So we should be mindful of how we're disposing of our data. Another thing is that most of us who continue to store paper documents for 7 years or so have to be mindful that that facility that it's stored in has to itself be secure, have staff with background checks, themselves have gone through all types of security clearances, and have all the appropriate measures in place to safeguard your documents, which for 7 years are out there with that non-public information in it. And Steve, that's why we appreciate your insights here, because that is a key vulnerability in our industry, given the documents we keep and need to hold on to through a storage facility like yours for up to 7 years. The next thing I'd like to do is we're done with the main part of the presentation. I'm going to pass it back to Glenn, who's going to open up a Q&A session for us. Glenn?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So this, as Chris mentioned, this concludes our regular part of the presentation today. For those who wish to remain on, we do have a couple questions in the queue that we're going to address. I did have a general question that had come in during the presentations, and that was when and if the slide presentations and our video is going to be available, and that should be sometime next week. If you want to log on to lendersecure.com, it'll be in the resources page on the website there, so you'll be able to access the video portion of this, the PowerPoints, and the audio portion as well. So thank you to the presenters. Thank you, Chris. So a couple quick questions for those who want to remain on. Let me go to them right now. So the first question we had, I think this came in during your presentation, Jim. Is the SCA assessment just focused on best practice pillar number 3? Can you address that?
Yes. You know, originally that's where we started, and as we were out conducting the assessments, a number of our clients asked us to help them with the other 6 pillars, and we have done that. So in the last 5 or 6 months, we've adapted to expand our services to help the clients put together a nice binder and a nice booklet that complies with all of the pillars. So the answer is yes, we do go beyond pillar 3.
Great. I'm going to switch over to the slide real quick here. Okay. The next question we had here is pertaining to pillar number 3 again. Does this require an outside assessment certification? I'll open it up to the group there. Jim? Yeah,
Chris, you want to weigh in on that one? You know, my opinion, and it's obviously going to be very biased, is that you know, you can do these internally. I don't believe there's a requirement that a third party do it. I think it's a highly recommended activity because of the complexity and the depth that's required to comply with pillar 3. But
sure. So we all know that ALTA has developed a self-certification process, forms, and checklists to enable us as a starting point to ensure that our companies have in fact become compliant. If there's one pillar that the lenders have said they're most concerned about, it's obviously Pillar 3, information security, for two reasons. It's the most challenging, but also because it's the one pillar that's got a legal mandate behind it: Gramm-Leach-Bliley, FTC, privacy, disposal and safeguard rules, as well as 47 states who now have data breach notification laws. So if there's one pillar where you want to really bring in an outside company to second guess and work with your in-house or outsourced IT consultant, it's certainly best practice Pillar 3. The lenders, with regard to national vendors, have already doing audits and assessments of those large national title and settlement vendors. They haven't, as we know, en masse come down and pushed out their actual requirements for assessments to the smaller and mid-sized independent title and settlement agents. There are some exceptions, as we know, some one-off banks that have sent out letters typically mimicking the 7 pillars of best practices. And my recommendation is that you self-certify as a starting point. Your next step is you work with a security assessment company to do a security assessment of your company, because that's certainly going to be required if the banks go to the next level. And remember, no matter who the banks choose to come in and do an assessment overall, if it's for the 7 pillars, you need to have worked already with a security assessment company to ensure that you're already up the curve. And then you need to work with solution providers like the Lender Secure members who can provide the data security and escrow fund security solutions to actually make you compliant. So I think the main thing here is to get about the business of getting compliant and start the self-certification process, then the best practice Pillar 3 certification process, and then see where the lenders come in. But regardless of what they ask, if you're not actually compliant, you're in a bad position when they come out with their new requirements.
That's great. Thanks, Chris. Another question, and this is for you two again, Jim. This is relating to cost, and I know it's difficult to pin this down, but maybe you can give an overall. The question was, what is the approximate cost for security compliance associates assessments?
Okay, well, that is a loaded question, but it does depend on the size and complexity of the operation. But just as our base price for basically a 10 and under employee shop is right around $5,000, and let's just, for comparison purposes, said if you had a 100-man shop, it would be somewhere around $10,000, give or take. And again, it depends on the size, the complexity, the number of servers, the locations, number of locations, and so forth. So I'll be happy to give you my name and number, and give us a call, and we'll walk through that with you.
I'll also make sure in the follow-up email to everyone that contact information is there for each of our presenters and our providers for Lender Secure as well. Another question here, does electronic copies of files suffice, or do you need to keep the physical file, and for how long do you need to keep it? I think this question is for you, Steve Wesley.
So the electronic documents, so they're going to vary depending on the type of document. So there's 2 ways to think about it. There's a legal requirement and there's a business use requirement that you want to consider when you're assessing how long to keep that document. Chris, could you help with, do you know the years, the year time for a specific?
I know as a general rule, 7 years is commonly accepted as a holding period.
But also, you want to assess on top of the 7 years. It's important to assess business use of that document, because your business use of a document could potentially be longer than the retention period. The key is to make sure that you're tracking these documents and you know when they're eligible to be destroyed, so you can remove them when they've met their usefulness, whether it be the legal retention period or the business retention period.
That's a great point, Steve, and that's a great service that companies like yours provide, where when you're shipping out documents for storage, you've sat down with your document storage company and identified protocols and ways that your staff can track by document, by file, by barcode, what documents you have, by category, sort out documents so that you understand when you can, for any purpose, start terminating documents and take away all the risk that goes with them.
Okay, great. I've got another question here, and it's a general question, so I'm assuming, Jim, you can answer this, and Steve Leslie, if you would answer as well. It says, I am vetting a new vendor. What should I ask them so that I can determine if they would be a good vendor to start working with? For example, closing agents, offshore, back office, those kinds of questions. But I'm also assuming they're looking at partners for some of the services that we're talking about today.
Yeah, I think this is Jim, and we offer a third-party due diligence sort of process and education checklist, if you will. But you want to be able to look at, again, it depends on the vendor and what the purpose of that vendor is. But do they have secure facilities? Have they gone through a security audit and assessment, maybe up to including an SSA 16, and that should be reviewed. Your contract should be reviewed to ensure that there's proper confidentiality and non-disclosure components in that. A financial condition of the company, insurance, those types of things, and we'd be happy to share with you a more detailed checklist. But it's really looking at their security, looking at their contract provisions, and looking that they're a stable, established, financially secure, insured company.
Yeah, no, this is Steve. I think that's spot on. The only thing I would add is the company that you choose, should be able to help you assess your needs clearly and have a solution that will fit your needs, as opposed to trying to stuff you into a stock solution. Your needs are going to be different than the next business, so it's very important that the solution provided is dedicated just to your business.
Okay, thanks, gentlemen. I've got another question that just came in. Their question is, are there documents not eligible to be destroyed once they are converted to electronic documents?
I'm going to just take a crack at that. Chris Galata here. Some of that depends on your agency agreement with your underwriter. So I would check, if I were a title agent, I would check with my underwriter to make sure that they're okay with that. If I were an attorney, I would look to the rules for attorneys. But I know that more and more companies are going to a cloud-only format. And if you do go to a cloud-only format, Steve Russo, can you just add what you should look for in a vendor there?
Certainly. It does depend on whether you're looking for a hosted solution or just storing documents. With regard to storing documents, obviously security is key. Audit trails, as was mentioned multiple times throughout this presentation, are key. Having the ability to share information with others and not necessarily giving them control of the information, but allowing them to view it, I think would be an important tool. Again, I would be looking to services that do not outsource their cybersecurity. Those would be the main pieces that I would look for, and of course something that's affordable.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Steve. Another question, and it's a little bit of a takeoff of what you just addressed, Steve, but the question really centers around the pros and cons of going to a wholly off-site cloud computing solution. Did you want to address that, Steve? Steve Russo?
Absolutely. Sure. There's a variety of different reasons to do so. The number one reason to go about that type of a solution is you folks are in the title industry. You're not expected to be cyber experts. That's our job. Do what you do best. For example, I never paint my house because I'm not a painter. I outsource that painting. You should be looking to outsource your cyber needs to a highly qualified technical cyber security provider. Also, there's additional certifications in which give you additional comfort and assurance that your data can be protected. There's providers out there that store data in a PCI certified manner, which is equal to the levels that Visa MasterCard store information to. That will help you to sleep at night, because the reality, and it was mentioned again on this call earlier, potentially you could be one data breach away from being out of business. For that reason, I think you need to make sure that whatever cyber provider you use is using a robust solution that you feel that you've done the research and you believe is unhackable, or as the highest level of protection available today. I hope that answered that well.
That's great, Steve. Thanks. Another question here. If we're using an independent notary public, do we have to do a background check as well as have a copy of his E&O policy?
So, Chris here, Glenn. I'm going to take that question.
Please do.
So what the regulators, the OCC, the FDIC, the CFPB, the Federal Reserve, what they've all said in their third-party relationships bulletins and service provider bulletins to the lenders is that the lenders are responsible for any vendors that they use, any, quote, supply chain vendors that they use to facilitate the closing process. In the same way, any vendors that we engage, we are responsible for. So, we often think when we think of vendors, we think of our IT consultant, we think of outside closers, we think of our accountant, we think of who has access to the file, the data, the information, and the like. When it comes to a notary, this is particularly important to me, and I think this is a great question because there's a real cultural shift going on here. Out in California where you have escrow companies, they, by statute, my understanding is, have to go through background checks and the like. So my suggestion to the person asking this question is, if your company is using an independent notary, I would highly recommend, because remember, they're getting your package. If anything happens to that package, you're responsible for it while it's in their control. So if they commit a data breach, if they leave it in their car unlocked over a weekend and someone steals that file, you've got to send out a data breach notification law in 47 states and notify everyone on that file. And that is probably enough to make your business partners not want to do business with you anymore. So I would put those notaries, as you would your employees, through, I would make them read and review your privacy policies and procedures. I would make them sign your privacy policies and procedures. I would make them go through your information security staff training and awareness training on data security. I would do the background check as your question invites, and I would also check, as your question invites, for their E&O insurance as well. And the reason I'm particularly sensitive about this is because in our workflow in this industry, it is when the file is fully assembled for the closing that it is, quote, spring-loaded from a privacy perspective. It's at that point that it reaches the high water mark of its toxicity, if you will, from a privacy perspective. And it's at that point that documents like tax returns, 1003, uniform residential loan applications, and the like are included in the file. So even though the role of the notary might be less substantive than the services you provided all along the way, that notary, when they are in physical possession of the file, holds that file at its most risky point. So aside from a customer service standpoint and wanting to screen people that are interfacing or customer facing on behalf of your company, from a best practice pillar 3 perspective, I would recommend that you're able to document that they've read your policies and procedures, they've signed them, they've gone through your staff training for security, information security, that you've done background checks, and that you've ensured that they have the E&O, to answer your question.
Great. Thank you, Chris. I think that's all the questions that I have that have come in so far. And so I think what we'll do is we'll just conclude today's presentation unless any of the presenters has anything else to speak about. I think that will hold it for today. I want to thank everyone for coming, and I want you to keep an eye out for our promotion for Best Practices Boot Camp number 3, which you should be receiving in the next 30 days. Oh, I'm sorry, I've got one more question. Let me take this really quick. Would it be all right to recycle copy paper that may have NPI info on it into another file that will stay inside the office? Good question. Steve Wesley, would you want to answer that?
I mean, as long as I think as long as as long as we're following that information management approach and we're protecting that file, I guess the concern would be who has access to that file, and does the person who have access to that file, would they be permitted to see that information that you're referring to? I mean, as a general rule, I think it would be a bad practice because of the opportunity for someone to see something they're not supposed to. But again, the key is just ensuring that the data is protected and that the individuals who are accessing it have the authorization to do so.
Great. Thanks, Steve. I have one more question I'm going to take real quickly here, from Cindy. Can a title company give an approved HUD or the new closing disclosures to the realtors and be compliant?
I'm going to jump in. Yeah, I'm going to jump in here real quick. This is a really good question because, and originally I thought this question related to the forms and the new disclosures, but I see what the questionnaire is getting to, which is, can you share any of these closing documents, the closing disclosure, the HUD settlement statement, or any closing documents, I'm going to expand the question, with any other third party who's not involved, who's not a settlement provider, who's not a necessary part of getting the process done? And there's an argument that the realtor is not a necessary party to facilitating the title or settlement. So my recommendation, because I understand that if the realtor has originated the transaction or has referred in your title or settlement company, I understand that historically they've asked for these documents and that as a practical matter there's some business pressure to feel that you have to share these documents. What I would recommend is obtaining the borrower's consent to share these documents with their realtor in advance.
Okay, I think that is the last question that has come in. So again, thank you, presenters. Thank you for attending, and look forward to our promotion on Boot Camp 3 in the very near future. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye now.